Hello everyone, my name is Sergio Campos. I'm the CEO of Amped, and it's a pleasure to meet you virtually. From an agenda perspective, today we're going to spend some time understanding how to really differentiate your organization by leveraging the executive suite from an outreach perspective on LinkedIn, and how this can help you in a very competitive landscape. From an agenda, what we're going to talk about is the problems that we face as vendors. Once we discuss this, then we're going to dive into how you can differentiate yourself and define what executive outreach is. Following that, we're going to talk about the intent. How do you create an intent behind your executive outreach? And then ultimately the strategy. And this is working closely with marketing because they are the linchpin that makes all this happen. From there, I'm going to give you some real life scenarios, and hopefully that gives you enough tools to hit the objectives of this presentation, which is really you walk away with the ability to understand what executive outreach is, how to differentiate yourself in a competitive landscape, and ultimately take this to your C-suite and propose and move forward. Now, selfishly, from an AMP perspective, we want you to learn this and come to us and ask us, how do we do this? We are an organization, we are a company that allows organizations to scale their LinkedIn outreach from a strategic perspective. Don't think of this as a lead gen tool or people that are going to get you meetings. This is really how to build your brand and your company's brand across the ecosystem in a way that allows not just the individual, but the company to build solid relationships at scale that lead to opportunities and pipeline. Now, before I dive into the agenda, what I'd like to highlight a little bit is my career. I started in technology about 18 years ago. Buddy called me and said, you want to do the startup you like to work? I had never been in tech, and I joined a company called Arrowhive Networks. And that's where I chipped my teeth for the first time trying to get meetings by dialing people. And this is back in the time, jigsaw days, where you were dialing 100, 200 dials a day. We had NetSuite as a CRM. So many of you may remember that, but then we went to Salesforce, so everything was fixed. From there, I went to a company called Mobile Iron, where we went from 0 to 400 million in a span of 4 years. In 2012, we were the fastest growing tech company of all time. Obviously, things have changed, but at that point, that moment in history, we were at the top. And then following that, I joined Dropbox as the first enterprise hire. And from there, that's really when I started getting into very early stage companies, startups, and did several of those that led to acquisitions. And then ultimately landed in a role at one of my favorite companies, Valamel, where I had great bosses, great CEOs, and really had a great time working there. But it was my time at all these startups where I was faced with the same problem. And it's the problem that most of us face today and have faced all our careers, which was how do we convert cold outreach? And that leads to the presentation where myself, 2 years ago, with my co-founder, Scott Wright, uncovered something. And we uncovered that people want to have conversations. People want to talk. But the problem is that we, as vendors, have created a massive problem out there. And we'll talk about that in a bit. And we created Amped. At first, it was really a service company for the first, I would say, 20 months. And just recently, within the last 4 months, we've built technology that includes AI, the ability to scale outreach, that really makes it easy for organizations to scale executive outreach, and in a cost-effective but with a high ROI approach. Won't talk too much about what we do, but we just make it easy for organizations. Now, from an agenda, what we'd like to do is really just dive right into it. Right now, I think if we look at the problems that we face, there's two main obstacles. The first obstacle that vendors face is that organizations, it's very hard to differentiate yourselves. And I'm going to pick on cyber. Now, cyber, as an example, has 3,000 vendors. And obviously, it fills the whole spectrum of what cybersecurity can solve. If you can implement all 3,000 vendors, that's good for you. But the problem is that we as vendors are trying to differentiate ourselves against our competitors. So company A kind of sounds like B, C sounds like B, and D sounds like A. And the reason is because you can only differentiate yourself so much with messaging and understanding what the value prop to persona is. Now, we help organizations find that. We help them find what we call the golden nugget. What is it, that one term that's going to get your customer and prospect to raise their hand? And so we work with organizations to find that, but that's when you're working with Amped. If you're out there on your own, Google your value proposition and find out who else is using it. And you can see there's going to be several vendors that are probably using the same value prop. So it's hard for individuals to differentiate you versus your competitors. We all have the same problem, regardless of how special I think Amped is. I walk into meetings and sometimes people are like, well, what's the difference between you and this and that? Always going to happen. So what are you going to do? We're going to get to a solution in a second. So that's one problem. The second problem that we face as vendors is that over the past 30 years, we have bombarded our prospects and customers with millions of emails. As we think about this, that's millions of emails, hundreds and thousands of calls to the same individuals. Now, it's great, you hit that 5% of people that actually need your product, but the other 95%, you're scorching, right? You're not building relationships, and those are the people that are gonna buy from you later. So keep this seed in your mind. Your goal at the end of this presentation is how do you create a relationship with those 95% of people so that when they're ready, they're going to raise their hand. And that's really the purpose behind intent of executive outreach, is to build those relationships. Now, we've been bombarding these folks. They've been emailed. We're predictable. It's spammy. I think more importantly, it's annoying, right? You get those calls, I get those emails, and we ignore and we move to spam. And so you have these two main problems. One is it's hard to differentiate yourself, right? Number two, you've created a wall, so your customers and prospects won't listen to you. So really, what can organizations do? And this is where strategic outreach from your executive team is really important. Now, when I say strategic outreach, this isn't booking meetings. This isn't trying to fill the pipeline right now. That is a residual of building relationships. Just like most senior salespeople, executives know that deals just don't turn overnight. It takes time. It takes investment of resources, including building relationships. It's key. So what we do is we show organizations how to do this at scale. And what we're going to talk about today is really from an executive perspective, what you need to do in order to get this launched. So now that I've mentioned the two problems, the solution is executive outreach. Well, what is executive outreach? So think you have your CEO, and I put these into two main buckets. You have your CEO and you have your executive team. These are two buckets that you can leverage today to do outreach to your prospects and customers. There's a third bucket, which is a sales team, but that is in a completely different approach, completely different strategy. But it's all really managed by an overall marketing strategy across the board, and we'll talk about that in the fourth segment of this presentation. But right now, let's just say you have your CEO. So your CEO needs to understand what kind of CEO they are. So are they a first-time CEO? Are they a serial entrepreneur, meaning they've done this a couple times? Or are they an incumbent CEO? So when I say incumbent, think this guy, gal or guy have been around for a decade or more, leading companies, has a big brand. Understanding who your CEO is, and then putting out a target to do executive outreach through social, specifically LinkedIn, because LinkedIn has a better trust ratio than email. Email, you could see it in numbers. You're getting less than 0.25% reply when you do these email blasts. So what you want to do is get your executive team to start doing outreach to your prospects, to your customers, whether it's customer success, customers that are in the pipeline, or customers that have closed. You're going to have your executive team build relationships with everyone at scale. So what do I mean by scale? Now, your CEO, your executive team are not going to spend their days sending emails or LinkedIn messages to each. That's what somebody else is going to do. Specifically with our customers, AMP does this for organizations. So we manage executive profiles and also sales team profiles to do outreach because it's just a lot simpler. You outsource the whole process. And then we have technology to feed it back into your CRM and Slack or Microsoft Teams. So from at a very high level, You're going to leverage your CEO to do this outreach to build those relationships. You may target focus on Global 2000, but that's really what the definition of executive outreach is now you're using your executive team, your CEO, to help you or the organization build relationships. Now, what is intent? So intent is I would say the second most crucial thing when it comes to outreach, specifically for LinkedIn. What is the intent of the outreach from an executive, from CEO, and I'll throw in sales in there too, because I would believe that there's a lot of salespeople that need to hear this as well. What is the intent of the outreach? Now, if you're going into LinkedIn saying, oh, my intent is to get first meetings, there's a way to do it, but it's not going to happen within the first 2-3 messages. You still need to build that trust. Or if you have the ability to build that trust within the second line of outreach, so response and you reply, you got it. You can maybe ask. But there's different methodologies, different approaches for your goals. But ultimately, the intent is what's going to drive the success. I've had CEOs tell me, listen, I don't want to do outreach to get meetings. I just want to build a relationship with the community. That's pretty much what you will do. So as a CEO, you want to build relationships with the Global 2000, the Fortune 500, or maybe it's mid-market or SMB. You want to make relationships with the decision makers. Now, it's very important that your intent is genuine, meaning as a CEO, I want to build these relationships. Down the road, I can help them, they can help me. So that's the way to look at it. Now, if you're a VP of product or VP of engineering, you're wanting to engage with customers and prospects to understand, are you building the right product? Does it make sense? And getting feedback from them. Now, all these approaches, you could see you're starting a conversation with these individuals. You're not going in for an ask. What you're doing is you're going in and building relationships. Ultimately, what we've seen across all our customers is that about 5% of all the people that you have conversations with will result in a lead, marketing qualified lead, sales qualified lead into pipeline. Closes, that's up to your team, but what we can do is help you establish relationships and build on top of those relationships. Now I say you can do this on your own as well. And so really when you look at the intent of these engineering, whether it's VP of engineering product or the CEO, it's making sure that the intent is true to the individual. Now you may have a CMO and they're wanting to do surveys. They're wanting to get market feedback and maybe produce a report. So that is the intent of the individual, really to help marketing get feedback from the market itself. Specifically on LinkedIn, you get so much data and so much response that it really is valuable information. Now, once you have you've determined, okay, we're going to have our CEO do executive outreach, or we're going to have our CRO, our CMO, our VP of product do outreach. Now, align the intent. The most important aspect of this is it all gets tied into marketing. So marketing is huge because what they're going to do is give you goals over a period of time. And what I mean by goals is they're not telling you your number of MQLs or your number of sales qualified leads. What they're giving you is a roadmap of what your customers and what your prospects can engage with. As an example, marketing has a calendar where they're going to have maybe 5 executive dinners a quarter across the country where the CEO and other C-suites are going to. So you, and maybe as a VP of sales or lead gen, are going to start planning your outreach on LinkedIn around those regions. And that's really going to give you a high impact, because when you get to that event, now what do? You just build those relationships. And there's a lot that has to do with copy as well. Copy is super important through this whole process of going back and forth. Us as a company, Amped, we don't get it right out the gate, because if we did, we would charge a lot of money if we were able to nail your value prop to persona out the gate. A lot of companies get that confused. They think, oh, well, I'm going to hire this company, they're going to do it for me. No, it doesn't work that way. It's a back and forth. It's a tethering. If one company doesn't understand that, it just doesn't work. And so what we do is we give framework and we make sure that you execute on that. And so from that perspective, you're going to have marketing help you build your campaigns around events, webinars, maybe it's a ball game, maybe it's a dinner, whatever it is, you are building your outreach with intent and these profiles to reach out to folks around these events. Now, that's not the only reason, but it has the highest return. So if you want these people to engage, whether it's a VC event, whether it's a dinner, you do it through social, you build a strategy with marketing and how you're going to drive attendance, and you execute. Now that you've talked about, we've talked about the problem, right? How you're going to use the executive team to differentiate yourself when it comes to outreach. You want to make sure that the executive suite has an intent behind it. And then ultimately you want to tie this in with marketing. So understanding field marketing, understanding what the CMO wants to do, and the field marketing team and demand gen, how you work with them is very key to the success of executive outreach. Do not go out there and just do executive outreach. There needs to be a plan in play because if you do that, it will putter out after time, because you could only do so many outreaches without giving something to your customer or prospects. So we have many CEOs under management, and some of the most important ones that we see are advisors and board members. Leveraging your CEO to encapsulate the board and advisors to help use their networks to build relationships and get meetings, right? It's another lane that organizations can use that is untapped. So understanding the board, advisors, and really mapping that out from a CEO perspective can give you a multitude of engagements regarding meetings, field gen, whatever event that you're driving. You're going to want to make sure that you're in line with those folks. So having the CEO leveraging his profile to engage with board members, advisors in their network is just really one use case that you can use a CEO profile. Other use cases that I think are really impactful, as an example, is executive outreach at conferences. So knowing who's going to be at the conference, understanding that, and doing outreach from a C-suite makes a huge impact. So whether it's dinners, whether it's certain aspects of events that you want your crowd to go to, then you do that. But it's the underlying pin under all this too. You have marketing, and then you also need to take in consideration your copy. So your copy is the most important, and it ties with the list. I would say copy and list is a true indicator of what your success will look like. You cannot do spam and pray and hope, because you will scorch. You have to use the right language. And when I say language, LinkedIn has its own dialect. So with that said, I do want to summarize the presentation for you. So I think the first thing that you want to do is go back and map out, okay, what does my executive outreach look like? As you go into the next year, start planning, start selling, start positioning internally. Okay, from an executive perspective, who's doing outreach? This is how you're going to differentiate yourself in the marketplace today. If you do not do this, other companies are doing this today, and they will differentiate themselves from you, not based on your technology, not based on your messaging, but because their C-suite is reaching out and building those relationships on LinkedIn. And then what you do is you map this plan out, understand, okay, here's the intent, here's this marketing calendar, here's the strategy, this is how we're gonna sell it internally. And so once you have all these pieces tied in together, then you could take it to the executive team, present, and have them do outreach. Now, as a plug to Amped, what we do is we make this really simple. We've done this dozens of times where we come in, we work with executives, understand what their outreach, the intent, we map that out, we help create copy, and we help you reach those numbers that have been a struggle for a while, but now with the executive teams on board, you can hit your goals and metrics and get pipeline. Now, this doesn't happen overnight, so if you're coming and you're saying, I need meetings, This is an investment. This takes 2-3 quarters in order for you to start. You'll get returns right out the gate for sure with a C level, with CEOs and some of your executive teams. But from an overarching strategy that includes sales, this takes about, I would say, 9 months to really start producing something predictable for sales from their perspective. So CEOs, right out the gate, you'll build those relationships, you'll get those meetings. Executive teams, same thing. Sales takes a little bit longer, but through this whole process, we're understanding what your value prop, the persona is, because we're reaching out to the right markets. So with that said, that concludes my presentation. I would love to engage with you if you have any thoughts or questions about this process. Look forward to hearing from you. And once again, my name is Sergio.